Yes, what's good, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Veterans Minimum here at the Wynn Las Vegas in the lovely, delightful Blue Wire Studios. I'm your host, Nick Deus, at Nick Deus 10 as you can find me. VeteransMinimum.com is where you can find everything for VM. And my guest today is a guy who I've been interacting with on Twitter for a long, long time. I've been on your show the last couple of times, your first show that you started, and we'll definitely get into that in just a second. But Shane Jackson, what's good, dude?
Well, when you started saying lovely and delightful, I thought that you were getting ready to intro me. I was very excited. I was like, man, this is flattering compliments coming from you. This is the first time we met. But instead, you just kind of defaulted to the original intro, which I guess it's fine. I'm doing great. This is great. It's great to be in here. Thanks for having me. Felt like I owed you because you've been on a couple of my shows. So hopefully I'm as good as you are on my shows, or at least half as good, I guess.
Dude, it was funny because the first time that you asked me to come on your show, it was like kind of not last minute. You had given me a heads up, but it was the first time I ever recorded a podcast where I was literally on the run. Mm-hmm. Like I'm walking throughout all of the Wynn because I had a meeting over here at 2 a.m. and I'm trying to figure out I'm underneath this like light fixture and the custodian is just cleaning up shit next to me. And I was just like, man, I know this is kind of weird, but I was like, that was my backpack on the floor. And I was like, yo, don't worry about it. Like it's all my stuff.
I thought it was electric television. I have friends, obviously, who watch every episode. They think you're the best guest I've had so far. I mean, it's only been 10 or 11 episodes, so don't be too high of yourself. But yeah, I thought it was electric. It was a really fun show, and I think all your predictions were great. So
yeah, so far so good, man. But I do want to mention one thing before we dive into the show. I want to give a shout out to the members of the Patreon. We got Nick Chavez, Christopher Velasquez, Derek Playtees, Devin Rendon, Jordan Riley, Nick Crummich, Thomas Robinson, Alex Harden, Mike Wozniak, and we got 2 new members, David Kawasa and Matthew Rico. Thank you all for your contributions to the Patreon. Shane, the reason why I did it now is because oftentimes I do forget and I get heat. It's like, yo, this is one of the perks. And I'm like, yeah, I got to stop being a dick and forgetting how to do that one.
Yeah, you got to cover everything at the top that you have to get done. Otherwise, you'll forget. You'll get into rambling and talking, and then you'll just forget it. So I agree.
Dude, tell the people a little bit about what your show's about. Because we mentioned me being a guest on your show, and they're probably like, what the hell are these kids talking about?
Yeah, so I work for Bet Chicago Sports. I'm a content creator for them. And basically the premise of the website is I'm a beat writer, essentially, that covers sports betting. So my audience cares about the Chicago teams. So that's the Bulls, the Blackhawks, the Bears, and some of the college teams around that as well. And I will basically create sports betting content around that and cater to Chicago area teams. Now, I will get into the NFC North and the Big Ten and all that. But I'm a writer first and foremost, hence why I will not be as much energy to the podcast as maybe you do. But we like to do a podcast on the side. We do 3 shows a week, Monday, Thursday, Friday, and it's basically 20 minutes a day, and I will go live and answer questions or have a guest on and preview, do sports betting, all that stuff. So, but basically the podcast is on the side, and I hope that the guests bring more of the analysis from that standpoint, and then I write probably 3, 4, 5 articles a day. I'm just cranking out content because that's the game. That's the name of the game at this point. So I'm just writing a bunch of articles, and that's where you can find all my work is at shotlocal.com/bet.
Dude, you couldn't pay me enough to write. I can't. Writing is not my thing at all. I don't enjoy it. I don't like it. I can barely put tweets together. So for me to have to put out articles and whatnot, I can't do it. But I feel better in front of a camera and doing the microphone stuff as opposed to doing the writing. But I do like your work, man, for real, because we've known each other for about a year now. And it was funny when you first pulled up to the studio. I was like, yo, nice to finally meet you, like, in person. It's always weird is it meeting someone because you have the Zoom conversations and being on podcasts, is that a nice to meet you, or do you think it's when it's in person?
I think you get to know people, honestly, maybe better through kind of Twitter and organically social media that way. I feel like I know a lot of people that I follow and interact with on Twitter more so than I know people I talk to on a decently regular basis. Like some of my friends from high school or whatever. Like, I see them a couple times a year, but I know people on Twitter extremely well at this point. And I think that for us, that's how it was to me. So it didn't even feel like we met for the first time today. It feels like we've known each other for a little bit.
Yeah, that's a fact, man. I couldn't agree with you more. And it's funny how you had me on your show this week, and I feel like it's a nice segue because you mentioned the Chicago sports scene for you. Giants now 3-1. They played the Chicago Bears, which was crazy because someone was going to be 3-1 after that game. And I'm a huge Giants fan. As you can see, I'm wearing the Victor Cruz This Victor Cruz used to have a clothing line when he caught fire with the Giants. One of my favorite Giant football players of all time, and I think his company was called Young Wills, and it was on fire like that first 6 months because he dropped it right when the Giants won the Super Bowl. And dude, that 3-year stretch that he had is honestly, it's like Hall of Fame worthy. Just that 3-year stretch, you put that up against a lot of people. He's obviously not going to make the Hall of Fame, but he was a very special player for the Giants. And he actually played for the Bears too. I think his last team was Chicago in the preseason. I remember he scored like a touchdown. It was after, because, dude, one of the reasons why I hate the Eagles is because like his career ended over there. He had that really bad patella tendon, I think he blew out. And ever since then, Cruz was not the same. We never really got to see Odell and him. Like Odell was a rookie that year too, so we never got to see like, yo, you got the slot guy, now you got the guy on the outside. So Chicago and the Giants, I'm wearing this shirt because I don't know how many more Mondays I'm gonna be this excited about the Giants, because they're 3-1, Shane, and I think they might be the worst 3-1 team in recent memory.
Yeah, I feel like there was a Chiefs team a few years back, and I'm from that area, so I think I remember it a little bit, that where they started off undefeated, and everybody said this was the worst like 7-0 team or whatever, 6-0 team, whatever it was.
It's like the
time.
Alex Smith, early Alex Smith.
Yeah. And so I feel like maybe the Giants aren't that level yet, mostly because they're not undefeated. But yes, it does feel like it may be one of the worst 3-1 teams, but. That's the advantage of having a schedule where you get to take advantage of some of those situations. You play the Bears because you finished low in your division. So, no, I mean, you're going to take wins however you want them in the NFL. It's hard to win on a week-to-week basis. But that game, we had to watch it, or I definitely had to watch it. But it was not exciting, and I had to rewatch it, and it's not as exciting on the rewatch either. It was an ugly 2012 game, as ugly as the final score would indicate. And I'm not sure what direction either team plans to go, but I don't know. It's not going to be a good thing.
What's the pulse of Chicago fans with Justin Fields in this organization?
Yeah, I think you're sensing a little bit more panic than I expected this early on. It felt like, there was that national narrative going in that they didn't give Justin Fields the best situation, and this team was going to be awful, maybe one of the worst teams in the league. And so far, it's proven to be somewhat correct. But the Bears fans, the audience, they were pushing back on that kind of narrative. And now it's kind of come into fruition, and suddenly they're panicking on Justin Fields. Yesterday he had an exchange with a reporter where he basically, someone asked him why the passing offense isn't working. And he said, who says it's not working? And the reporter said the stats. And well, Justin Fields responds by saying the stats doesn't matter. And they do. Like, Justin Fields has not delivered from a stat standpoint. He's not delivered in any standpoint, really. But I also don't think it's his fault. No one's put him in the best position. When Darnell Mooney's your best receiver, you're struggling there. You're thin in that unit, and the offensive line is below average. And I think conservative play calling is a big reason why they are 2-2, and the reason why they lost, yesterday's game as well. So I don't know. I sense the pulse is panicking a little bit, but I think you have to give him another year, because they're really built to have a chance in 2023. They have a lot more cap space. They'll have some high draft picks, and I think they're built to be better next year. And then that's when you can really evaluate what Justin Fields brings to the table, because right now he's not given the chance to play quarterback.
Yeah, it's one of my most passionate takes that I have when it comes to quarterbacks, young quarterbacks in particular. It's two things, right? It's number one, he needs to have an offensive mind early in the league, without question. I don't want my rookie quarterback coming in with a defensive-minded head coach. I want a guy that is offense first. Eventually, when you become Josh Allen, you become Tom Brady. Rare exceptions, right? It's dime a dozen, if that. Justin Herbert's Joe Burrow. Then it's like, you know what? This hot young defensive coordinator that might become a head coach, sure, no problem, because the guy has enough skin in the game now where he doesn't need to be held by the hand, walk through all these practices and these offensive schemes and whatnot. That's one of my takes. And the other one is Justin Fields in the last 5 years has gotten the shit end of the stick with the organization that he's with, because, like you said, if Darnell Mooney's your number one, right? It's a speedster, undersized guy. Yeah, he could get open, and he made a nice play with the Giants yesterday. I think it was the best game that Mooney had all year so far from a stat standpoint.
Absolutely, yeah.
And But you're looking at it, and it's like Cole Kmet. At one point, would the Bears have like 9 tight ends on their roster? That was like the running joke heading into last year. And the offensive line isn't that good. And it's how can you fairly evaluate him? I think the case study should be Tua. Like Tua, a month ago, it was like, what's it going to be with him, right? But what did Miami do? First round pick was a wide receiver last year. You get an entirely new running back core. You improve the offensive line to protect them. You get Tyreek Hill because you're not paying your quarterback $30, $40 million. Let me go get an elite wide receiver. And you see now Tua's like, yo, could this guy be the MVP? We pumped the brakes a little bit, but that's what it should be, right? The Jets, I think they've done a good job by Zach Wilson in the sense of, yo, here's a first-round wide receiver. Here's a second-round wide receiver. Here's a second-round running back. Let's attempt to go get they spent money on Corey Davis. Yeah, that was a dud, but you're not going to hit a home run on everything. I mean, shit, look at the Giants with Kenny Golladay. That's a nightmare. You look at the Giants, right, staying in this game. The Giants have done everything right, in my opinion, with providing offensive skill players for Daniel Jones, but he just isn't it, right? Like his best asset is running. Like that's the only reason why the Giants won that game yesterday. Also, it's because they gashed the Bears on the ground. It was like 250-something yards between Barkley and Daniel Jones. And it's now you could properly evaluate what the quarterback is when you give him weapons. Joe Burrow was going to be successful because he has T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, Boyd, Mixon. It's like, yo, this team is stacked offensively. So to me, it's just not fair for Justin Fields, what's going on with him in Chicago. And you're right. I think you have to be patient with him. But also, it's a fine line, Shane, where you don't want the guy to become damaged goods like Josh Rosen or David Carr getting sacked and getting beat up. And then eventually it's like, what am I going to do with this guy?
Yeah, and the whole reason why people seem to be more likely to give up on these young quarterbacks is because there's an advantage to having your quarterback on a rookie contract and the way you can build your roster. That is the ideal time to go for it and build a team around that young quarterback is when he's on a rookie contract. And so I think that's why you're seeing teams give up a lot earlier, like the Cardinals going from Josh Rosen to Kyler Murray real quick. But Josh Allen is an example of an outlier happening, right? He was bad for 2 years and then becomes one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Tua is the best example, right? He was not put in the best position for 2 years, and then now year 3, he's, while maybe the numbers are a little bit more amplified than they should be, he is now given a chance to at least see what he's made of. And so I think you're right. Tua is the ideal situation to compare Justin Fields or other young rookie quarterbacks or young quarterbacks that come up.
Well, yeah, but I think that's what you said right there is what you want, right? The proper evaluation of these guys. If they're playing with a weak roster, it's not fair to them. And then it's also not fair to the organization because what happens if you surround them with a lot of mediocre talent for the most part, and then they do leave and they go to a new situation, and then you're like, oh, wow, it was us, right? Yeah. One of my favorite things to do, like in the NBA, is give me the guy that was a lottery pick. I'll take a chance on him. Especially when they get released by a team or they don't sign a second contract with a team and they're 22 years old, 23. It's like, yeah, dude, of course these guys are going to act a fool when they're getting paid millions of dollars at 18, 19 years old. Give them a chance to learn everything. Look at Andrew Wiggins with Golden State. Guy went to the right situation finally after all these years, and he was the second best player on their team when they won the championship last year. So I know we kind of like went all over the place, but at its core, it really has to do with it's the situation and the circumstance that you're being dealt. Like that's the ultimate, like Pat Mahomes goes to Andy Reid and the Chiefs.
Yeah, that helps.
That team was in the playoffs year in, year out. Of course he was going to be successful, especially sitting behind a guy like Alex Smith who, yeah, two completely opposite players, but you're going to a team that's successful. And then you have a Kelsey in place. You have a Hill in place. You get Sammy Watkins. It's like, yeah, no wonder why he was going to be successful and play that well. What'd you think about that game, dude? Now that I just mentioned Mahomes.
Yeah.
I know it was the night game, but Kansas City goes into Tampa Bay, revenge on their mind, because the last time they went in there, it was a sour feeling for them, something they'll remember for the rest of their lives, losing that Super Bowl. How'd you feel about that game?
Yeah, I think last night confirmed that Petty Mahomes may be the best player in the sport. Like, I think he already is the best player in the league, but like best player to ever step on a football field type of thing. Like when Patrick Mahomes is petty, that's when he's different. It is incredible when he's got something to prove. When the bright lights are on, like, and he wants to show something. He's incredible. I mean, that touchdown throw to Clyde Edwards-Helaire where he spins a guy and just dumps it over. It's just incredible. Like I feel like we've spent too much time discussing who compares to Patrick Mahomes when in reality, like number 2 is a distant drop off from Patrick Mahomes. And so, yeah, I think that's just what stood out to me. I would say that it being a Super Bowl rematch is a good time to reflect on just how the Chiefs have changed since that Super Bowl. You mentioned it before, but like the offensive line, obviously they revamped the offensive line after that Super Bowl because of what he did in the Super Bowl behind that offensive line. But also this past year, they put themselves in a position to have more long-term success by trading Tyreek Hill. And I just think you're seeing the Chiefs realize because of that Super Bowl in a lot of ways that, hey, we might have the best player in the league, but we have to consistently be a Super Bowl contender by doing other things. And that's scary for the rest of the league. Like that's not what Aaron Rodgers and the Packers dealt with. That is what Tom Brady and the Patriots dealt with. And so that is terrifying to me.
I mean, look, he was on your show. He was my MVP pick, Pat Mahomes. And right now he has 11 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. He is 6th in the NFL in yards. And you know what's interesting about Mahomes? They showed that graphic yesterday on Sunday Night Football. He's the fastest to get to 20,000 yards. He beat out Matthew Stafford by, I think it was 4 or 5 games. Mm-hmm. They needed all his yards.
Yeah.
And these are winning yards too, right? Like I think oftentimes stats are misleading. Remember Blake Bortles that one year was like the 7th best quarterback in fantasy, but every time at halftime they're down 20 points. And yeah, it's garbage time Bortles. It was like a real thing in fantasy. So the numbers could be misleading, right? I always mention how one of the worst awards ever given out was when RG3 won Rookie of the Year that year over Andrew Luck because RG3 threw 7 interceptions or 6. Andrew Luck threw like 15. It's like, yeah, he also threw the ball 400 more times, and his team made the playoffs as well. But it was the expectations of both teams, and it was very fun, like the Alfred Morris and the RG3 offense in Washington, and they exceeded expectations and whatnot. And I think that numbers could be misleading sometimes. But with Pat Mahomes is they needed all those passing yards, and they were winning passing yards too. Like he's putting up 300 yards a game, not because his team is down and he has to throw from behind. No, they're running up the score. And that's what you saw against Tampa. The offensive line finally, last year they made all the additions, but now they've all played together for a full year. And you had a lot of rookies. You had 2 rookies starting last year. Now you have them in year 2 in this offense. And dude, it really comes down to, I'm telling you, that's going to be the game that depending on how this Mahomes dynasty ends up, or how many more championships they win or Super Bowls they get to, that Super Bowl that they lost to Tampa is going to be the one that they're going to go back to. And notice that for as much as we love Kelsey and Hill and Watkins and Hardman, if number 15 got to be running for his life, don't matter what we have out there.
Yeah, and it's super terrifying because they always had Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, and now this might be the best defense that they've had in this roster. Like, and I thought there was going to be some growing pains and adjustments with the new receiver core, and maybe there will be still some more to come. Like Sky Moore hasn't been as involved up until recently, but it's pretty terrifying that it's working this well this quickly. Because I thought there was always going to be some sort of adjustment period. And honestly, I mean, the game they lost to the Colts, that's a game they should have won. I know, like, I ended up betting the Chiefs like probably a lot of other public people did, and the Sharps were on the Colts. But even the Sharps would have told you that they probably didn't deserve to win that one. Like, that felt like a game the Chiefs gave away. So the fact that, we're sitting here and talking about how good the Chiefs are already, when I think typically they're going to be at their best later in the year is pretty scary for the rest of the league.
Well, yeah, I mean, covering and winning are 2 completely different things, right? Like, I think everyone felt that the Colts could maybe keep that close. Yeah. Down, you're 0-2, you're at home, your first home game. It was just a weird spot, but a lot of professionals, and I've met these professional bettors out here, and so far, dude, they've told me 4 picks, and they're 3 for 4. The only one that they were off on was the Commanders yesterday, but they told me the Patriots plus 9.5. They told me Seattle plus 3.5, and I was like, I would never bet these games. And then I'm like, it makes sense why. And they were on the Colts last week as well. So I think the interesting thing about Kansas City is they've changed who they are on offense with the running too. Like Pacheco looks like every time he touches the ball, he might never touch it again. Like he's running really hard and kind of looks like Tyreek Hill, maybe because of the number. But at first, I'm always like, oh, I do like a double take at first. But they're beating teams underneath. Like, yeah, the offense has changed. We're not seeing those 70-yard bombs. They're not really attempting them much. That's where they missed Tyreek, but they're still productive. And, dude, they hung 40-plus points on Tampa Bay, whose defense has been the best defense in the league. And Mahomes was doing whatever he wanted to them yesterday.
Yeah, I think, last year's when the kind of narrative started that teams would try to play too high against the Chiefs and try to, like, force them into taking the safe routes and avoid the deep bombs. And the Chiefs were getting frustrated by that. And now this year it feels like they're like, okay, we'll take that.
Dude, I hate some of those false narratives so much sometimes because, yeah, Tampa Bay was able to do that to Kansas City because they had that pass rush. Absolutely. And they were also playing four new starters on that offensive line. That's why they were able to do that. It's like, if you have the roster, yeah, you could do that. But if you don't, it's going to be hard for you to do the too high safety against the Chiefs and Mahomes.
Similar to how back in the day it was like, yeah, just get 4 people to create pressure like the Giants do. When they won these Super Bowls. It's like, yeah, well, only the Giants can get away with that. So.
Yeah. Well, the same thing in the NBA, right? Everyone wants to shoot threes. It's like, oh, Golden State does it. It's like, yeah, no shit. They got the 2 best shooters ever on the same team in their prime. Like, obviously, they're going to be able to do that. Like, yeah, no kidding. It's just weird sometimes, man. Some of these narratives that get painted, it's just comedy to me. Speaking of which, one thing that I found really interesting is what do you make of the Lions, man? Because of like the Hard Knocks, right? Hard Knocks, they were the darling team, the narrative of them and, the bite the kneecaps with Dan Campbell and this young roster and whatnot, and maybe they can make the playoffs. Dude, they're 1-3. Might be the funnest team in the league to watch.
Absolutely.
I never would have guessed that a Seahawks-Lions game would be the game of the weekend.
Yeah, so, obviously I made a lot of bad preseason predictions, but the one that I think I nailed was, I wrote up the NFC North and I said, hey, here's how you're going to bet on each team in the NFC North because I have an audience that cares about the NFC North. And I said, you're going to want to bet the over on the Lions games because they have a lot of fun, exciting offensive pieces, but also they still have the worst ranked defense in the entire league, and they made no changes to improve it. Like, they obviously drafted Aiden Hutchinson, but they were really counting on health to be a major benefactor to that defense. And, it's coming to fruition. The overs hit 4 times in 4 games. But I think one of the more interesting things to me is that it hasn't mattered who has been there. Like, This is the second game in a row where they've had a lot of cluster injuries, and those are typically like damning. And they still scored a bunch of points. I mean, we had Jamal Williams score 2 touchdowns. TJ Hawkinson unleashed for 2 touchdowns yesterday. The Lions, just no matter who is out there, no matter if their offensive line is full strength or not, like, they are scoring and they are moving the ball. And it's very exciting. It was one of the things that I found frustrating all offseason because I understood the hype around the Lions. They were the most popular over win total, and I was betting against that. I was like, this is crazy. They're still terrible on defense. Like, I understand why you want to be excited about them, but they are still 1 year away from being a contender, right? Or being competitive. They still have Jared Goff. Like, there was a lot of, factors in there, but I think, they're losing the right way. Like, they are showing a lot of grit, I guess is what you can call it, and a lot of fight with Dan Campbell coaching them. And their offense is a lot to be desired. It's good for fantasy players, obviously. I don't know. I'm excited to watch Lions games, and I'm just happy that it's come into clear picture that this is an over team. This is a team you want to bet on, but they still might be a year away from actually being competitive because that defense is still a liability.
Yeah, they're very young still, and they're making a lot of like young mistakes. Yeah. And no St. Brown, no DJ Chark, no DeAndre Swift. 378 in the air, 4 touchdowns for Jared Goff. I mean, this is finally the Hawkinson that everyone has been. I think he's had this game and then like week 1 of his rookie year where he came out and scored 2 touchdowns. Outside of that, he's been all right. But now yesterday was what was he? Prime Gronk, built like Travis Kelce. Also, was just the craziest thing. Seattle 2-2. And I'm going to tie 2 things into this one. I want to talk about the Seattle aspect and then the Denver aspect of it. Because born and raised in New York, I have a lot of friends that are Jet fans. And they were throwing a parade when they fleeced them with Jamal Adams, right? Like, you're giving up all that for a safety. That was a layup to make that move if you're the Jets. They turn that disaster and getting fleeced into fleecing Denver. Because even though Russ is an upgrade from what they had, they gave up a lot to get him.
And had to pay him.
Yeah. And they had to pay him. But Seattle had to make that move. And if you're Seattle right now, this is what you wanted. You're in a rebuild, but you're competitive also. And NFC is pretty bad. I'm not saying they're going to make the playoffs, but they could be playing some meaningful football post-Thanksgiving, which as a Giants fan all these years, that's all I ever wanted. I didn't want October 1st, my season to be over, which is nice now for both New York teams. If you think about it, the Jets and the Giants, it's like, all right. At least it's fun. The stadium is going to be lively. You know, one of the reasons why I was on the Giants beating the Cowboys on Monday Night Football was because I know all these years, the Giants and the Cowboys, when they're playing each other in MetLife, it's always when the Giants are 1-9 and Dallas is 7-3 competing for the 1 seed, and all the Giants season ticket holders are selling their tickets on secondary markets to Cowboys fans. And then it's 70% Cowboy fans in there. But now there's optimism with the Jets and the Giants a little bit, even though maybe a month from now it might be a different conversation. But I think if you're Seattle, this is what you want. You still got Metcalf. You still got Lockett. Rashad Penny's on fire also. You got some young guys on defense, maybe because the expectations were so low. Is it fair to say they're overachieving?
Yeah, I mean, the expectations were low. I thought when I did my power ratings, I had the Seahawks as probably 31 or 30 to start the year. I was like, this team could be number 1 pick worthy. I just thought they were going to be bad. I was on their under for the win total, and they've exceeded expectations in a big way. And so, yeah, I think that was one of the first teams I've kind of moved up, them and the Falcons, I would say, in the sense that, yeah, they're bad, but maybe they're kind of better of the bad teams type of thing. And, yeah, I think that shows promise for going down the road because, you still have a couple good receivers. They drafted pretty well this past draft, the Seahawks did. And Kenneth Walker was someone they picked in that draft as well, so I assume they see him as their long-term picture as well. So once you figure out maybe the quarterback position, who your long-term answer is there, like maybe suddenly this is they bounce back in a hurry. Like this isn't a long rebuild, this is a short rebuild.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Denver on the flip side, with what they got in Russ, they just look weird, dude. They're 2-2. I feel like they're 0-4, just the way everyone talks about them. And yesterday against the Raiders, that was gut check time for the Raiders too. I love that spot that they were in. They had to win that game or else their season was completely tanked. You don't want to be 0-4, especially in the AFC. But the thing that was interesting about the Raiders is they unleashed Josh Jacobs. And it was funny because shouts to Antoine in the control room. Last week, a couple weeks ago, I called him mid. And he was like, nah, dude, he's
legit.
Yeah, he's legit. But it's like he's probably the weakest point on their offense, I would say. If you were looking at the tight ends, the receivers, and then the running game. But then yesterday he has a career day and he just goes ballistic. And it seemed like Denver couldn't do anything on the ground to try to stop him. And then on the flip side, defensively for Denver, he's becoming my favorite player to watch is Patrick Surtain. Him and Adams going at it was really, really fun, man. One was getting the better of the other, and then coming back, it was the other way around. It's nice to actually watch games. Like there was only 3 games in the afternoon window, and I had 3 monitors, so I was watching each game individually, and you understand certain things that you miss on like Red Zone. And that was one of the things that it was nice to really highlight and to spotlight because you really see like how good Surtain really is. And obviously we know about Adams.
Yeah, I had a lot of money on the Cardinals, so I was more focused on that game. But yes, I do agree with the sentiment that like I try to rewatch all these games on Monday or Tuesday and get a better feel of what happened because you do miss a whole lot.
You miss so much, dude.
You don't get the game script at all. You don't understand the flow of the game at all. But in terms of what the Broncos, I'm curious what your thoughts of this. But here's what I'm thinking without rewatching the Broncos-Raiders game yet. I think the Broncos are set up similarly to how the Rams were last year. Like there's going to be a buy low opportunity on this team. I'm not saying they're going to win the Super Bowl by any means, but I think there's going to be a buy low opportunity on this team because the Broncos were the only team that came in with a new coach, a new quarterback, a new play caller coming in. So there was always going to be growing pains at the beginning of the season. And it feels like every single game, I'm like, how did the Broncos not win this game? Like every time I watch the game, I'm like, I feel like the Broncos should have won. Like yesterday's game against the Raiders, that fumble 6 completely swings the momentum of the game, the win expectancy, all that stuff. And so I just feel like at some point it's going to click. Maybe Russell Wilson is bad now, and all this will be mute because like there's no way they can be good if Russell Wilson is bad. But I just don't think he is, right? I think maybe he wasn't maybe worth the trade that they sent his way. Maybe he wasn't worth the money, but like I don't think he's bad this year. And so at some point I think it's going to click all at one point, and I think they're going to be a buy low team at some point this season.
Well, you also got to mention that it's the first time coming into a season that a team hired a new head coach, got the new quarterback, like you mentioned, and also their coordinators are first-year coordinators
Absolutely.
too.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you're right. It could be. The thing that worries me about them is their last 6 games for them is they got the Chargers twice, they got the Chiefs twice, there's a Bengals game in there. It's like that's where you really want to be playing your best football. But from an odds perspective and like finding value, like, yeah, this could be – their odds are not what they were coming into the year, and they've weathered the storm. Like I was saying before when we introduced this conversation, I feel like Denver's 0-4 the way everyone is slandering them, and
Absolutely.
they're 2-2.
Yeah.
And they play the Colts on Thursday. Worried about the Colts? I'm not personally. So there's a chance where they might be 3-2 going into this like mini bye week. And then a lot can happen. So you're right. Russ can't play any worse.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think this is the worst that Russ is going to play. Working in with all these new guys. Judy got hurt a little bit. Sutton got hurt, came back. They lose Williams.
Yeah,
which,
absolutely.
Dude, that blows, man, because I was waiting for them to like cut the cord on Melvin Gordon. It also seemed like he was cutting the cord on himself because dude is just fumbling 3 times a game, it seems like. Like he's trying his best to cost them the game. And then now they lose Williams, so they're going to have to rely on Melvin Gordon. But you're right, man. I wonder what happens with Gregory because he got hurt yesterday. I didn't see anything yet at the time that we're recording on any news or updates, but I know they ruled out Javonte Williams torn ACL. He's out for the year. And the buy low, I agree with you on that. I think it could be something to definitely monitor. Like the team that I was looking at to monitor is Cleveland.
Mm-hmm.
They get Watson back for, I'm talking about strictly from a football standpoint. They come in as a 6 or a 7 seed, man. That's going to be a dangerous roster because they have a lot of playmakers on that team. Like Nick Chubb, we're going to get to Nick Chubb in just a little bit, but Nick Chubb is balling. You got Amari Cooper, Peoples-Jones makes plays, and Njoku is making plays too. They have a really solid offensive line. And then you add the dynamic of Deshaun Watson in there when he comes back. If they're floating around being a playoff team, I think that's a team that you definitely want to keep your eyes on from the betting markets.
Yeah, and Brissett's been better than expected, but you saw yesterday in that Falcons game. I mean, he cost them. Like on that last drive, he takes a sack when he cannot take a sack because they were about 1 or 2 yards away from field goal range. That rookie kicker hit a game-winning field goal in week 1. Like who knows what his range was, but I think York would have hit another one there and maybe tied the game up. So yeah, it was one of those situations where Brissett doesn't always have the awareness. I think he threw it away on 4th down in the red zone at one point. So I do agree. There's probably gonna be a buy low opportunity. That was a game they probably should have won, and now they're sitting at 2-2. But they had a manageable front-loaded schedule, and then Watson comes back, and it's gonna be marquee game after marquee game because they have a pretty backloaded schedule.
Yeah, for sure. And he comes back against Houston also, which people were really outraged about it, and rightfully so, right? Like you tell them you're gonna come back, and that's gonna be the first game. That's clearly just trying to grab a number and grab a rating. I don't know if it's because I bet them at plus 6.5 and I was on the Jaguars winning that game outright. But dude, am I being biased saying that that's an all-time bad beat? I think that's an all-time bad beat.
That was tough. Like the Jaguars jump out to a huge lead. I don't know. It feels like
they ruined my weekend.
They did.
They blew up a couple parlays. I had them in my contest. I got them at plus 7 at the time because I lock in my picks early in the week. Of
course,
the first number that comes out, and then you're able to adjust until the line locks, until the game's lock. And dude, 5 turnovers. They lost all 5. And even at the end, Philly doesn't kick the field goal, which I found rather interesting there. They go for it, and then I'm like, oh my God, they might backdoor this. And then literally the next play, strip fumble, and they lose the ball. And I'm like, dude, what is going on? You jump out to a 14-0 lead. Philly looks all sorts of off. And then it's like, oh, dude, now I have like 20.5 point cushion. And they just ran through it, dude.
Yeah, there might be something to Trevor Lawrence in conditions like that yesterday where it was, obviously wet. because I think he had a pretty human game at Clemson in like the ACC championship, one of his last couple years there. So that might be worth looking into at future points if Trevor Lawrence is playing in the rain again, because you're right. That was, I mean, honestly, that was the story of the game for the Jaguars. Like, it felt like, hey, they got a lot of momentum. They're up on the best team in the league. Like, let's go, and you have a lot of points to work with. And then, the Eagles, they storm back. And I don't know. I feel like a lot of it had to do with weather. Obviously, I think the Eagles deserve a ton of credit. They're a wagon, and it's only going to get easier for them.
Yeah, they're favored in all but 2 games the rest of the way. They're interesting, man. And it's the thing about Philly. And look, even Jacksonville benefited from the weather too, because I think the interception that got picked off was kind of a wacky weather kind of play. And Philly, though, that was the kind of game that they needed to play also, because they were down, they had to come back, and they weren't able to do all the running stuff that they wanted to. Yeah, they stayed true to that, but Miles Sanders got going. He was a guy that I've been high on him every year, so like finally it paid off where I was right. But he's playing really well. A.J. Brown, I'll stand by it, the best addition any team made. Even more so than Tyreek Hill going to Miami. I think what he did for this offense. I mean, they're talking about Jalen Hurts being an MVP, and I think that's ridiculous, honestly, because he's throwing 4 touchdowns in 4 games. Yeah, he's doing it on the ground and whatnot. I get that, but you're going to have to throw like north of 30 touchdowns if you want to compete with some of these guys that are going to throw. Mahomes is on pace for 40.
Yeah.
Right. Allen is on pace for 40. You're not going to win the MVP throwing 22 touchdowns. You're just not. When these guys are going to throw maybe double that. So Hurts, I think, is going to be really interesting watching him the rest of the way. And so is this team, man. Like, this team, I don't think they're going to lose until about like week 9, week 10, when they got to play. They play Green Bay. That's the only game that right now it's a pick 'em. Mm-hmm. But who knows what the updated lines are going to be, the look ahead lines are going to be on that now with how Green Bay was over the weekend.
Yeah. I like your point about that was a game that we had to see from the Eagles, though, because I felt like that was the narrative about the Ravens during Lamar's MVP season.
Yeah.
They were always in control. They were always in the lead, and it's like they got to control the game. And it felt like we were already getting a little bit of that discussion around the Eagles and Jalen Hurts as well this year, and then you quickly erase it. And now I think, again, weather played a part in that, but knowing that they have that tool in their toolbox, I think that's pretty telling about where this team is and where it's going.
Dude, I love that you mentioned Lamar and the Ravens, because that was going to be the last game that I was going to mention. And one of the big talking points that I have for this, and the thing that I'd be very concerned about if I'm a Ravens backer or a Ravens fan.
Well, you're talking to one, so.
What's going on with them blowing these leads?
Yeah.
Because wasn't the makeup of the Ravens and the way to beat the Ravens is you jump out on a lead on them, right? And then you got to get Lamar to throw from behind. I think he has only 1 double-digit comeback win in his career in which he's trailing by double digits. But that's the team that you don't want to play when they're up 2-3 scores. And now this is twice in 3 weeks that they just can't hold the lead. And that's literally the team that you don't want to have a lead, because Lamar could do all his RPO shit and he could keep it on the ground. Dobbins came back yesterday. It looked like he gave him a little spark. And then they could still hit you over the top. Like, I like Bateman. I think Bateman's had some great strides. We know about Mark Andrews, a premier tight end in the league. And that's a team that if they do jump out to the lead, you're kind of screwed. You're not going to beat them. And now it's 2 times. And guess what, dude? Both of them at home. Yeah. So you can't tell me that, it's a road game and it's a trap. But it's like, what's going on in Baltimore?
Yeah, I'm choosing not to push the panic button just yet. I feel like we won't get an accurate picture of this team until those guys that are coming back from injury are getting their legs under them a little bit. Like, I'm not throwing panic button right just yet. It is a little bit concerning, obviously. You go back and watch that Dolphins game, and Marcus Williams had a chance for his 3rd interception in that game, and he drops it right in his hands. Next play, touchdown to Tyreek Hill, cuts it to 1 score. Otherwise, that game is probably over. Yesterday against the Bills, Patrick Queen has a touchdown or an interception that falls right into his chest that he drops. Otherwise, that game might be over. And obviously, Ravens didn't get some of the calls that went against them either on Sunday. So I'm choosing not to panic just yet. They're 2-2. You're losing to 2 teams that are reasonable to lose to. It'll be tough to argue that if it happens again, especially. I mean, I feel like the way the Bengals just throttled the Ravens last year. Like, if you're not coming out with some sort of like energy and swagger in this matchup on Sunday Night Football, like I feel like that is very concerning to me. So it'll be interesting to see how they respond into this game. And that's when I'll be a little bit alarmed. But right now, I mean, they still have Ronnie Stanley. They're on the 4th string left tackle. You know, guys are just coming back, like you mentioned, Dobbins as well. So Lamar being maybe one of the best players in the league right now is the only reason why they have looked as good as they have looked. Otherwise, I think they have some issues at their core, but they're still kind of figuring it out. And they were always going to be a team that was kind of slow to start the season, and while guys were getting healthy and maybe better in December.
I mean, looking ahead to this week, I already bet the Ravens -3.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
I took that early. Yeah. I've been pretty good at betting games early in the week. Like Minnesota, I bet them on Tuesday last week at -2.5.
Mm-hmm.
Game ends with a field goal.
Yeah.
A lot of people took it at -4, -3.5. It's like, man, betting when you bet a number might be more important than actually making the bet.
Yeah, I think it was
Like the side that you're on.
Yeah, I think you were the first one I heard say this on your last podcast on upsets and underdogs, but you said bet numbers, not teams. You were one of the first people.
That's my number one rule when people ask me about sports betting advice. It's like, yo, bet numbers, not teams.
And obviously, I've now heard it a bunch of times since. But I just vividly remember you were one of the first ones to say that. And a lot of times it comes down to the number, right? And so, yeah, betting earlier in the week, you get the better the number. You're ahead of the market a little bit. And so, yeah, I agree. That's one of the biggest pieces of advice I have is let's bet. I'm going to bet Tuesday. I'm going to bet, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. But after that, I'm probably not betting. Like if I'm betting on Sunday, it's a prop, and that's it.
Dude, the amount of conversations that I've had with people that are now getting into the sports betting space, and they'll be like, "Oh, Bills are gonna blow them out." Mm-hmm. It's like, no, I like Miami +6 at home against Buffalo. Nah, they're gonna blow them out. It's like, why? You saw what they did on primetime. It's like, I love it. That's exactly what I want to hear, right? And I was telling to a buddy of mine, because I put in my group chat, I'm like, damn it, man, I can't believe I lost this Jaguars bet. He's like, Philly was a lock. I was like, no, they weren't. I was like, dude, knowing what I know now, if you were to tell me they're going to play again, 6.5 point line, even with the turnovers, knowing about the turnovers, like, yeah, the Jaguars to me were the right side in that. Are you a UFC fan? Much of a UFC fan?
No, I watch UFC. I know nothing about UFC, but I do see when you tweet out picks, I'm like, okay, I'm going to bet that. That's my knowledge of UFC.
Well, thank you for putting me over with that. Yeah, we have been crushing the UFC, but there was a fight, right? Talia Santos was fighting Valentina Shevchenko, and Shevchenko in her weight class, like they literally made that flyweight division for her. Mm-hmm. She's undefeated. I think she's the best women's fighter of all time. That not here or there, is for a different podcast. But in her last outing, she's fighting this girl, Talia Santos. She was a 5-1 underdog. And my friend and I were like, dude, this is her toughest matchup yet, Valentina's. We got to bet the other girl. Like, I think Valentina's going to finish her. But from a number standpoint, 5-1 on her, we're going to make the bet. And guess what? She lost on a split decision, which means one judge thought she won the fight. At 5-1, I'm making that bet every time, even if I lose it. And to some people, like, it's weird for them to hear that. Like, why are you going to make a bet that you're going to lose? It's like, yeah, but the number was wrong. And it came down to, at one point during that fight, she was a favorite. Mm-hmm. The Jaguars catching 6.5 points on the road. It's like, dude, they had 5 turnovers. That's the biggest factor in picking games is turnovers. If you knew how many turnovers a team would have, you'd probably pick like 75, 80%. But it's so volatile, and you can't account for that week in, week out. So I love that you mentioned that about the betting numbers and not teams. It's like when you make these bets, when you make these decisions, is very important because the London game was the prime example. People just losing their minds over that. Like, oh my God, Vegas knows. It's like, well, they didn't early in the week. You're just waiting.
Absolutely. I stayed away from the London game. I think we picked the Vikings in the circa millions. But other than that, I stayed away from the London game. But yeah, it was definitely, that was a good example of it, and probably a good, example to use for people who are new to sports betting.
The last thing I want to talk about week 4 before we do some quarterly awards, staying with this Ravens game, the 4th down call. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, so I've already alluded to that I am a Ravens fan. And if you are surprised by that call, you have not been watching the Ravens for the last 3 years. Like, this is who they are at this point. Ever since Lamar Jackson has been taking the reins over this offense, this is a team that is maximizing whatever advantage it feels like it has. It is taking the risk that it feels like it has. during his MVP season, they were crazy efficient on fourth down because of it. And they won a lot of games because of it. Then fourth downs didn't go their way in the playoff game and they lost. Like, that's the variance you deal with. But they feel like when they take chances like that, they're giving themselves a 2 to 5% edge of winning that game. And so, yeah, I didn't have a problem with that call. Or the decision at all. I think if you watch back that play, Lamar feels like he may have missed that running back he put out in motion. He could have hit him on the flat right away rather than drifting off to the right and throwing in the corner of the end zone. I also think that like the way they approached the series before that was a difference. Like, they didn't run QB power or QB sneak at all in the plays leading up to that when they were right there at the goal line. And so, no, the way I have watched the Ravens, like, this doesn't surprise me. I am not baffled by the call. They did this with Tyler Huntley last year. Like, you haven't been watching if you're still complaining about the decisions that the Ravens make. And there was a lot of coaching decisions that were very questionable on Sunday. That was not one of them.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. And again, you have an elite guy who's playing at an elite level right now. I go for it every time. Mm-hmm. I've talked about it so many times about Aaron Rodgers has 4 playoff losses in which he ties the game or sends it to overtime. Ties the game in the fourth quarter or sends it to overtime, and then he doesn't touch the ball. It's like, dude, that's a loss on him. This guy threw 2 Hail Marys to Jeff Janis in a playoff game, and then they don't touch the ball. Like, go for 2. I'm so for it. I love that the Giants did that in week 1 against the Titans, right? And also on the flip side, add more context to this. You're going up against Josh Allen and the Bills. Like, that's an elite offense. Yeah, put pressure on them. Make them have to go and score a touchdown as opposed to settling for a field goal. Obviously, it didn't work out, but I'm not one of these guys that, they shouldn't have done that. It's like, nah, man, I want you to go for it, especially if you feel like you have momentum or you have a play call that you think you can get an upper hand on. Like you said, 2 to 5 point advantage, percent advantage. Like, why not, man? In everything, in sports and sports betting, you want to try to find an edge. And if you feel like you have one, you gotta take advantage of it at all times. And I have no problems with that call. I know it's a hot debate. Yeah. And then even John Harbaugh after the game was like, dude, it changes the pressure on our defense, knowing that the other team has to score a touchdown if we get it. And then also it's Josh Allen on the other side. Like, it's
if you're going to do the hindsight analysis on Monday and question the call, then you have to acknowledge the fact that the Bills just waltzed back up on the field and had a chance to score a touchdown. Like, you can't do hindsight analysis and then ignore that fact.
Right.
And so, context always changes, right? If you're playing the Bills, you're more likely to do that as well than versus maybe the Jets or the Giants. But still, like, I don't disagree with the call. I think even, as you mentioned, Harbaugh kind of alluded to it in his answer, but like, once you go for it and you miss, they're supposed to be on the 2 or 3 yard line. Like, if they don't throw an interception in the end zone, like,
right. Yeah. Well, that's a good call.
And so, like, then you're trusting your defense even more in the red zone. So, yeah, also Lamar Jackson's only thrown 2 red zone interceptions his entire career, and they're both against the Bills in what ended up being game-changing plays. So, just a little factoid there. But yeah, I think if you are still not sure about why the Ravens did what they did, like, you just haven't been paying attention, because we did this like 6 times last year. So I don't know. Yeah,
I love that one video when Harbaugh yells at Lamar. He's like, yo, Lamar, you want to go for it? He's like, let's go, coach.
Yeah, no one complains about that, do they?
Yeah. So I don't like doing that, like criticizing it after. Like, I'm for it, man. If you want a chance to win, that's what it's all about. Go for it, by all means. I do hate when they run 2-point conversions or goal line plays and it's like the sprint out to the short side of the field. It's like, all right, maybe not do that like that, because then it limits like your entire offense. But for the most part, I have no issues with you going for it. Let's give out some awards. Quarter of the season. I know there's still a Monday Night Football game tonight, but give me your surprise team. Now, the surprise team could be good or bad, depending on how you want to dish it out. I also want to add that when I do these kind of segments or these talking points, I really like to reiterate that I base these off what my expectations were personally heading into the year. Mm-hmm. So, for example, a lot of people's surprise team might be Philly. Not to me. I had them winning the NFC. So I just wanted to add a little bit of context before you tell me what your surprise team is.
Yeah, and I echo that sentiment because I also picked the Jags to win the AFC South, so they're not my surprise team, even though they're 2-2 and leaders of the AFC South. And I also was on the Eagles, pretty early in the summer, got a pretty good position on them to win the NFC East. So I was not picking them either, although they've been a lot more dominant than I expected. So my team is actually the Miami Dolphins. And the reason why is because I had them as like a fringe playoff contender in a very tough AFC. I was like, yeah, they'll maybe be fighting for the 7th seed on week 16, but will they really have a chance? I don't know. But now it's gone from that to like, I think this team is legit with a healthy Tua, obviously. But Mike McDaniel is doing something like incredible stuff with his team. They're doing a lot of motion, a lot of play action. And like you said earlier, like they're putting Tua in the best position. They're letting him get the ball out to his talented playmakers, a lot like what he did in Alabama, when he was a Heisman contender. He would just, hey, throw those balls over the middle. Let's let guys go make plays after the catch. And that's what's happening with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. And so I think the Dolphins are surprised because, honestly, I think they should have beaten the Bengals. Like, I bet the Bengals in that game, and I think with a healthy Tua, they win that game. And so you're looking at a 4-0 team, a team that's leading the AFC East, and all of a sudden has a decent track to like a number 1 and number 2 seed. So with that said, I know they have a backloaded schedule, but I think the Dolphins have come out firing out of the gates early. And regardless of whether it's Tua or Teddy right away, I think they're going to be in a good position because of who is leading the way. And it's Mike McDaniel.
For sure, man. And I think if you're a Niners fan, you're probably missing him about now because that team maybe he was the brainchild. Like, I know Kyle Shanahan gets all the praise, and rightfully so. He's an elite offensive mind. But Mike McDaniel has really changed that entire culture down in Miami. And I think he's a guy who we'll get to in just a second. But to me, my surprise team, dude, shouts to my guy Alan, the Atlanta Falcons, man.
Let's go.
Alan, my co-host on Wednesdays, so he'll be on later this week. But I've been texting him like, yo, how you feeling about Atlanta? Because, it's been pretty quiet down there, even like with Matt Ryan. But Mariota's making plays. I know Patterson now is going to be on IR. He's out 3 to 4 weeks, but he's a dude that's really fun. And Drake London has been a baller. Kyle Pitts, we're just waiting for him to have, the unicorn season that everyone was talking about. And, dude, they're exciting, man. They're 4-0 against the spread, the only team in the league with that kind of record. And if it's not for that week 1 game against the Saints where Mariota fumbles and then they end up losing that game, they came storming back against the Rams. Like, I know everyone that had the Rams -10 were cashing that ticket at halftime. And then Atlanta comes back, has a chance to win it if it's not for Ramsey making that interception at the goal line. And then you go into Seattle, still a tough place to play because there's still optimism in Seattle. And they were coming off the big win on Monday Night Football and whatnot. So I think Atlanta being 2-2, man. And lastly, I don't think that NFC South is it was like Tampa Bay was what, -400 to win the division? Mm-hmm. They're not looking like a -400 team.
No, not at all. It was always interesting how much of a favorite Tampa Bay was compared to the rest of the division. I thought Saints had a chance to make some noise and put some pressure on them. But that has not been the case, obviously. Last week, I thought the Falcons were the best of the bad teams. And I was like, well, okay, I'm moving them up in my power ratings. I'm going to look for opportunities to back them. But then I still bet Cleveland on Sunday. Had a lot of money on the Browns to win outright, all that. And obviously that didn't work out. And so now I'm thinking about, I'm going to have to watch that game back and think, should I move up the Falcons even more to above, kind of the bad team threshold? Because like you said, they just keep printing money for bettors. And, if you're late to the party, that's when you start losing.
Yeah. Oh, dude, man. I thought the Browns were going to win that game, but Nick Chubb, I bet Nick Chubb to have 3 touchdowns. It was like 20-1. But I also bet him to score a touchdown at any time. That hit. And then he gets stuffed 3 times at the 1-yard line. I'm like, are you kidding me? Can you not give me that plus 450 for a second touchdown? I was like, damn it. Again, I had a couple bad ones yesterday, dude. I had the Steelers defense anytime at 7-1, and Minka steps out at the 2-yard line. I'm like, you got to be shitting me, man. Unbelievable. But, that's the game that we play. Biggest letdown. This could be a team or a player. What would you say is your biggest letdown so far?
So I don't know if we're going to have the same answer here because we didn't really talk about this, but I think the obvious answer is the Indianapolis Colts. They have not won the AFC South since 2014, and this felt like the year. If there was ever going to be a year for this team to do it, it was this year. They were the favorites coming in. They did their latest QB carousel, and they got Matt Ryan, and everyone felt like that was an upgrade from Carson Wentz, and rightfully so. I think there were warning signs with Matt Ryan a little bit last year. He was ranked 17th among quarterbacks on Pro Football Focus, which was his lowest ranking since 2009. So like there was a chance that he was trending in the wrong direction, but even that was somewhat of an upgrade against Carson Wentz. And you thought, hey, maybe a better situation that'll maximize Matt Ryan. That has not been the case. They dominated from a yards per play perspective in week 1, but they still ended up with a tie with the Texans. They won a game against the Chiefs that I don't think they deserve to win. And it's just been bad. And there's no real signs of life, and I don't really know what the whole reasoning is. Like, I understand they're a little bit banged up, but almost everyone is at this point already. And Jonathan Taylor has just been bottled up like crazy. But I think the root of their problems is Matt Ryan, and that is never a good sign when it's your quarterback that you've been changing year in and year out, and this guy just isn't working. And so I'm starting to be concerned if I'm a Colts fan or a Colts backer.
Yeah, it's interesting with the Colts, man. I felt the same way. I picked them to win the division. And I did say I agreed with you on the Jaguars. Like, I thought the Jaguars line was a little mispriced. Like, the only way that they could make the playoffs would be to win the AFC South. So back home, you could find them at like plus 800 to win the South. It was a way better bet than betting them to make the playoffs. You got to figure, like, the AFC is so stacked, the only way they can actually get in is by winning the division.
Absolutely.
So I always felt like that was like the wrong approach. But yeah, the Colts, it's funny because my surprise is just how bad Carson Wentz is.
Yeah.
And it ties into the Colts a little bit because the Colts, he was their quarterback last year. And, Frank Reich, I don't want to say he's on the hot seat, but it's starting to get a little warm. And he starts off September year in, year out, just bad. But to defend him a little bit, he's had a new quarterback every time he's been there. Mm-hmm. Like from day one, it's just been a new guy in there. And you get rid of Carson Wentz, you bring in Matt Ryan, and it's supposed to be an upgrade, and it's kind of the same or worse. But then on the flip side with Carson Wentz, he just looks like this is gonna be the last year he's in the NFL. That's how like bad he looks.
Yeah, I was getting in trouble because I kept betting on the Commanders. It worked in week 1, and then I was on them on week 2 and week 3. Did not work out. But it felt like Carson Wentz was okay in week 1, and then it just fell out. Like, he has been awful ever since. And so I made a rule after week 3. I was like, I am done betting the Commanders. If I bet again, someone take my accounts from me. Like, I will stop betting. And so I know there was sharp money on the Commanders this last week, but I was like, no, I'm not doing it. I don't care what the number says. Yeah.
That was one of the 3 games that those guys told me. They're like, look, it's Seattle plus 3.5, the Commanders plus 3, and the Patriots plus 9.5. And they're coming off a week where they told me that the Colts were live for the upset and to take them in plus 5.5. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, interesting. And then, the day starts with the Lions not covering. Like, the Seahawks had that game covered by halftime. Like, you knew that it would have to be an all-time bad beat for them not to cover that 3.5. And then you look at the Commanders. Like, I get it, man. The numbers coming in and numbers moving and the lines. But sometimes it's like, yo, Carson Wentz is just not good. Mm-hmm. And neither is that offensive line. And they got some playmakers that I like, which is really upsetting. If he was on a team where he had no talent around him, I'd be like, you know what, man, I'm going to defend it. But I've always been a Terry McLaurin guy. Curtis Samuel's finally healthy. He's playing a lot. And the rookie that they drafted too, he scored 2 touchdowns in the first week. And it's like they have some talent there. But I think there's more issues in Washington, as everyone is well aware of, with all the craziness that happens with Dan Snyder and the organization. But to me, I just think the surprise is, dude, I used to argue with so many of my buddies that are Cowboy fans, like, yo, Wentz is better than Dak. And like the moment it was the summer before, like shit hit the fan, it's like that take is horrible. Get rid of that shit, never bring it up. But to me, he's been the biggest letdown, dude.
No, I agree. I in terms of player wise, I couldn't think of someone off the top of my head. I mean, honestly, Jonathan Taylor has been somewhat of a letdown, but
that's a nice one.
Nowhere near as big as Carson Wentz. But yeah, I mean, he was the number 1 pick in fantasy, right?
Yeah, but Taylor, someone in the Discord for VM. Jordan Riley, he's actually one of the Patreon members we shout out. He's like, dude, what am I doing with Jonathan Taylor? Like, do I panic? Do I try to trade? And I'm like, the thing that sucks about a guy like Taylor is, yeah, he does catch passes out the backfield here and there, but they got to be playing with a lead in order for him to like be productive. And I just don't know how many games they're going to play with a lead because they're just not moving the ball. And I'll stand by it, dude. I think Michael Pittman is their most valuable offensive player because when he's not in, you saw how bad it was against Jacksonville when he sat that game. They couldn't move the ball at all because everyone else behind them is just not that good. So it's interesting, man. Carson Wentz and the answer that you gave, too, I found fascinating with the Colts. I'm going to throw a wrinkle.
Uh-oh.
I asked you who's your MVP right now, right? I'll let you tell me who you think your MVP is, but from mine, I'm not going to give you a quarterback because we know MVP is a quarterback award, right? The only one to win it in the last, I think, 15 years was Adrian Peterson.
Yep.
The year that he did. Everything else, it's like 11 straight have been quarterbacks. If you weren't picking a quarterback, who do you think is the MVP through the first 4 games?
Ooh, that's
Do you want me to give you mine
yeah,
while you
go
think
ahead.
of it?
Yeah.
All right. Since it's my show, I'm going to cheat and I'm going to give you 2 guys.
Okay.
All right. One is Nick Chubb.
Okay.
Nick Chubb has had 100 yards or more in every single one of his games. He scored multiple touchdowns. Hold on. I have to refresh this page as we're looking at it. But is he not the be-all, end-all for this Cleveland Browns team? Like, he's averaging over 5 yards per carry, and it would be like a career high for like any other running back. But this dude does it year in, year out. His numbers are just through the roof every single year. He's just a beast. And it's like they still don't really unleash him because it is sort of he dominates the touches, but Kareem Hunt is out there often. And I know there's always a discussion like in daily fantasy circles, like, do I pay $88,000 for Nick Chubb in my daily fantasy lineup and whatnot? But look, he's averaging 6.2 yards per carry. Oh, sorry, that's receiving. My bad. He's averaging 5.7 yards per carry. Last year, 5.5. The year before that, 5.6. 2019, 5. Like, over 5 yards. He's in territory with Jamal Charles, who has like the highest yards per carry average like in NFL history. And this dude is just doing it no matter what. Like, no Watson, no problem, dude. Like, just give this guy the ball 20 times. He's going to make shit happen. The offensive line is one of the better run blocking offensive lines per PFF and all, Football Outsiders, all these advanced analytic places. But how bad would they be if he wasn't out there right now? And they're exceeding expectations, I feel like, because they don't have Watson. But just what he means to this team right now, for me, it'd be Nick Chubb.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with that based off, like, I know they had a favorable schedule to start the year, but it wouldn't have been surprising if they had lost some of the games that they did, right? And he's been the offense for his team. So I don't hate that call. You said you had a second one, but I wasn't sure if you were going to go into it. So I don't know. Like, I know he's only had 2 really good games, but they've been 2 of the like games that we've seen. And so it's tough not to say, hey, Justin Jefferson's on his way to winning Offensive Player of the Year. Therefore, like, if there's a non-quarterback argument for MVP, like, how is that not Justin Jefferson? Because, in the London game with everybody's watching yesterday morning, like he basically won them that game. He sets up the game-winning field goal there. And then obviously the first game of the year against the Packers, untouchable, unguardable. Like, he went off. And I know he had 2 down games by his standards in between that, but like the 2 most important games for the Vikings, I mean, he's the reason why they won them. So it's tough not to just say, hey, Justin Jefferson, because we're dealing with a small sample size here, but he's just been different already to start the year. And I know he was both our picks to win Offensive Player of the Year. He was everyone's pick. Like, he's just a stud.
Yeah, the thing that's interesting about him in particular and the wide receiver position is that it's the most unique position I feel like in sports because it's the only position that your success is determined by 2 other people. It's the offensive line blocking for the quarterback, and then the quarterback has to get you the ball. So when you're not productive, it's not you. It's the quarterback just can't get you to rock. And that's what you saw in week 2 and week 3. Kirk Cousins just wasn't able to get him the ball. It wasn't that he wasn't open or that, it's just one of those days like Deontay Johnson just has 4 drops in the game. It's like, nah, this dude just wasn't getting the chances. And the last thing about the wide receiver position, it's so isolating too. Like, they're the first ones to break the huddle. They're the furthest away from the ball. And for me to get paid, for me to get all these accolades, for me to be successful, I need 2 other things to happen well in order for me to flourish. So I don't know if I would say Justin Jefferson. he has fried the two corners that he's gone up against. Like he was lighting up Lattimore.
Yeah.
He was lighting up Jair Alexander anytime he was in coverage. And then the other games, it's just like Kirk wasn't able to get him the
threw
ball.
a billion interceptable balls against the Eagles. Yeah.
Yeah. The other guy that I was going to mention, and I think right now he might be Offensive Player of the Year, Saquon Barkley.
Yeah. That is true. I
Dude,
didn't even think about that.
That's the offense.
Yeah.
That's the offense.
That's a no-brainer. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
He leads the league in rushing. If he's not out there, the team is an abomination, like without a doubt. 463 yards on the ground, 2 touchdowns. He's had a long of 68 yards. He's had 4 20-yard rushes. Only Nick Chubb has more 20-yard rushes than him. Him and Rashad Penny have the same amount. And to me, it's just like when you're looking at like what they mean to their rosters right now, it's Barkley and Chubb. Mm-hmm. So those would be the ones that non-quarterbacks that I would pick. But if it had to be, like, who's like your legit one?
Yeah, and I know you kind of threw water on the take earlier in the show already, but like if the season ended today, Jalen Hurts is winning the MVP award. Like I understand maybe his stats aren't up to like the guys that we are used to, but this award is not given to the guy with the best stats. This award is given based off the narrative and the conversation that we create around the season of who the story of the season is. 7 of the last 9 MVP winners have been on teams with the number 1 seed. The Eagles have an inside track to the number 1 seed. They're 4-0 right now. And also he's got the narrative going with him. The fact that, you remember the playoff game last year? Like there was some little rumblings of like, hey, maybe they should, when the Eagles were down, like maybe they should put in Gardner Minshew. Like that was the same thing they said about Lamar Jackson and Joe Flacco when they got to their first playoff game as well. The next year, Lamar wins it because they take the league by storm and they win a bunch of games. Look at the Eagles' schedule. As we've already mentioned before, they got a lot of layups. This team has such a favorable schedule. They're going to win a lot of games, and they have the inside track to the number 1 seed. So it's going to be hard for Jalen Hurts not to be in the MVP conversation. And anybody who is going to win the number 1 seed in the NFC is probably going to have a very good case for it because AFC is going to like eat each other up. I think to some extent. Unless it's Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes that just kind of light the league on fire and win that number 1 seed. Like, say Joe Burrow, the Bengals, or the Ravens, or someone like that gets the number 1 seed. I think Jalen Hurts is going to have a very good case against that.
I wholeheartedly disagree.
I understand. Yeah.
You know why? As I'm looking at the numbers right now, I have a problem with Joe Flacco having more passing touchdowns than him, and he's played 1 less game. Like to me, that's a little upsetting. And Davis Mills has more passing touchdowns.
But we understand that stats don't matter in this award. Like,
yeah, but so you're saying about him being the 1 seed, and I agree because that's historically that's what it is, right? Like you need to be a 1 or 2 seed for the most part for you to win it. But if he doesn't have the stats to back that up as well, it's going to be hard, especially when you're looking at other guys. Like Kansas City has a roadmap to the 1 seed. So does Josh Allen.
For sure, yeah.
So like Mahomes and Josh Allen are going to put up the numbers, and they're going to be a 1 seed. Mm-hmm. So Jalen Hurts got to start throwing some touchdowns too. And I know he has a bunch on the ground already, and he's a very unique quarterback, but you got to throw some touchdowns, man.
Well, I don't actually have a bet on Jalen Hurts to the MVP, so I'm okay with him not winning the MVP. I just think, like, I know how these voters work. They like to look back at the season and be like, what was the story of the season? Like, what are we going to do? And, like, if the Eagles come out of nowhere, quotation marks, and get the number 1 seed in the NFC, like, he's going to be a candidate. Whether or not he deserves to win is a whole different story. But it just feels like we like to give the MVP award to someone who exceeds our expectations from a team point standpoint and a player standpoint. And Jalen Hurts fits that bill in a lot of ways.
Defensive player of the year.
You didn't tell me yours, by the way.
What, my MVP?
Quarterback, yeah.
Oh, dude, it's Mahomes.
Okay.
Yeah, 11 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. You talk about narratives, right? He don't got Tyreek no more.
True.
And he's doing it with all these new pieces for the most part outside of Kelsey.
Yeah.
And Hardman is, I mean, dude, I'm 0 for 4 on Hardman anytime touchdowns. Like, and they're not even close. Like, dude's playing like 6 snaps a game. I'm like, I keep seeing plus 320, plus 350. It's just going to keep going up and up. And I know what's going to happen. I'm not going to bet him 1 week because I'm going to be fed up. I'm going to be 0-6 anytime TDs, and then he's going to go out there and score a touchdown. So.
I'm going to be so mad if Mahomes wins the MVP or the Chiefs win the Super Bowl this year because I had both bets at really good odds last year. There's the lowest point you could get on both wagers and did not come through on either way. I thought they both were going to have good chances at some point in the season. So I'm going to be very upset when one of those things happens this year.
Defensive player of the year, I think it's Parsons, and there's not much to say to that, right?
Yeah, that's what I put. I like just talking about how the Cowboys are still competitive without Dak Prescott alone is enough of a narrative for him to win the award.
Yeah, and he's just been wrecking games left and right. He's unbelievable. All right, we'll end the show with this, man. Rookie of the year. Give me your offensive and your defensive.
Yeah, I went with the I think they're the two favorites now currently at Caesar Sportsbook. Chris Olave for the Saints. I think that really says how open this market really is because like I didn't understand why he was the favorite. But he's caught 21 balls for 335 yards and a touchdown. But I think this is a very good market to attack right now. Like if you think like Kenny Pickett and the Steelers are going to do something, like he's got like 7-1, 8-1 odds right now. Like there's a chance, like go get it. Or George Pickens even. Like this is a market I would attack if you're looking at the futures right now. As for defense rookie of the year, I think Devin Lloyd's the no-brainer right now. Like the Jaguars picked someone number 1 overall, and then he is dominating from a stats standpoint. He is the kind of the runaway favorite at this point at Caesar Sportsbook at plus 250. So I think that one is less likely. I'm less excited about attacking, but like the offensive rookie of the year, like I think it's anyone's game.
Wow. That's not who I had for defensive, man.
Really?
Yeah. I think the guy that's impressed me the most has been Gardner on the Jets.
Oh, it's so tough to win it as a cornerback, though.
Yeah, he needs an interception.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's probably not going to win it.
Has interceptions. He's a linebacker.
Yo, he's been locking up some guys.
Yeah.
You don't like that one?
It's so tough to win as a secondary. Like I don't even remember the last time. Like you have to.
I think 7 of the last 10 have been edge rusher, pass rusher kind of guys because you get the sacks. But he seems to be an alpha, man. He seems to be a guy that goes. He wants the matchup. Mm-hmm. He's not avoiding it. Like he played really well against Jamar Chase a couple weeks ago. I think he's a name to definitely watch out for.
Listen, I'm not going to fight too much about this because I actually didn't care about who won the Rookie of the Year awards after 4 weeks, but it's fine. I think that is a good call. I just think like it's going to be tough for him to win the award.
And I'm staying with Drake London. He was my pick coming into the year too, and he's been balling. It's him and Olave right now, and then creeping up is Damian Pierce. Mm-hmm. Pickens, I think, still needs to start producing a little bit more, but I think Romeo Doubs is interesting too, man. Like Rodgers is going to him, and yesterday he should have had the game-winning touchdown in regulation, but he just didn't maintain it. Which also that's the last thing, right? Like the catch stuff. It's so weird. Like I'm 31 years old. I still don't know what a catch is in the NFL.
There's a lot of things like that with football in particular, right? They're targeting in college, the catch at both levels. Like it's just. There's things that we are still confused by to this day, and we spend a lot of time talking about because they'll show replay and slow motion it and all the time, and we have no idea what it is. It's never consistent.
It's just weird. Like if I was to throw you something right now and you caught it, I'd be like, "Hey, nice catch." I didn't need you to maintain possession and to turn and give me a football move. Like it's just, I don't know, man. It's just weird. Like the whole catching stuff. It just doesn't make sense to me. I mean, he didn't maintain possession throughout, but he did get 2 feet down, and then when he hit the ground, that's when the ball came out. Just weird. And it was funny because they had Romo on that call, and they were asking him about that. He's like, I'm familiar, man. Something about this grass over here in Lambeau. Shane, this was awesome, man. I appreciate you coming in. Tell the people where they can find you, your content, all of the stuff that you're working on, your articles. The floor is yours. Plug away.
Yeah, so the easiest way to find me, obviously, is on Twitter at @SJacksonBet. But you can find all my articles at shawlocal.com/bet. All that content is for free on our website. And then, I track all my plays through Action Network at Jackson Shane 3. So if you wanted to tail me, you can do that as well. So different avenues there, but Twitter is where I would start at @SJacksonBet.
Dude, I'm so pissed with Action Network because I linked my books back home. It was like FanDuel, BetMGM, and DraftKings. And then when I linked it, all like the bets that I was tracking beforehand all got like deleted.
Oh no!
So and I was using Action Network from like when it first popped off because I've met Chad Millman a bunch of times and like he's been really kind to me and I've always been a fan of his content and his work. So when I got on Action Network, I'm tracking all this stuff. It was like 195 and 160 against the spread. All my futures since like 2018 also just all gone. And then I got logged on my account. I don't know what my password is because I was having this conversation with someone the other day. It's like, dude, how many passwords do you like cycle through? And it was like, had like the same 3-4 for everything. And then it just so happens not to be one of the 3-4. So yeah, I gotta make a new one. I gotta come up with a new name for the Action Network stuff. But at Nick Day is 10 as you can find me on social media, all social media. Check out the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Veterans Minimum. You could watch the whole podcast there. And again, at Veterans Minimum, all social media, and veteransminimum.com. And we will catch you guys next time.